Part 176. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 1751. Suan went out of the palace. Su Yu's body was still parked in the palace. Everyone in the palace was busy, but Man Bao and Bai Shan seemed to have returned to the past, reading books every day, repairing books, or going out of the palace to teach. I have a lot of time. Even when Princess Mingda and Princess Changjia came over, Man Bao still had time to sit on the rockery with them and chat with their legs dangling. It's just that they themselves know that each of them is still a little different. Even Mr. Zhuang said, "You have become more stable." The words contained some relief and sighs. Princess Changjia was mostly unhappy. She pulled a small pebble from the rockery and threw it down. She shook her legs and said, "Are you in a bad mood?" Man Bao turned his head curiously and asked her, "Why are you in a bad mood?" Chang Yu complained, "It's not even the prince's brother. He said it was the Eastern Palace who wanted to investigate the emperor's grandson, but they all went to my palace." She said, "A lot of people have been taken from my palace. I wanted hot water to wash my face this morning, but the water I brought was not very hot." Mingda said, "It's not just your palace. My father, and my mother's harem have taken many people away. And it's not just because of the eagle slave. There are such vicious people in the palace. Of course, we have to find out." After pondering for 8 or 9 months, the crown prince and the crown princess still hadn't decided on the child's nickname. The emperor couldn't see it, and finally set a nickname for the child himself after the third washing, called Yingnu. Because this child seems to be quite strong at present, the emperor hopes that he will be as strong as an eagle and soar in the sky in the future. Although the prince was a little reluctant to use the nickname given by the emperor, but after thinking about it, he found that the name was not bad, so he recognized it. Man Bao shook his legs and said nothing. Seeing her silence, Chang Yu bumped his body against her, and asked curiously, "You live in Chongguan Hall, and it started with you, you haven't heard of it?" She said, "There are too many people arrested in the palace now. I heard that even the emperor's grandmother has arrested several people." Man Bao smiled and said, "It was just that Master Tang asked him a few times. Although the needle bag that was replaced was mine, it wasn't me who harmed anyone. Su Yu, the only one who had something to do with me, also committed suicide. This matter has nothing to do with me anymore." "Yes," Chang Yu thought for a while and said, "At this moment, they should be investigating Su Yu's accomplices. But there are so many of her accomplices." Man Bao didn't speak, and Mingda didn't speak either. Now, it's not their turn to take care of these matters, but there are indeed some doubts in their hearts. There were a lot of people on Su Yu's list. There were not many people who she knew for sure were her accomplices. There were only 12 people in total. 3 of them had studied together. Although they hadn't seen each other for a few years, and she was young at the time, she had always had a good memory, so she remembered it. In fact, she knew a total of 8 people, but only 3 survived in the end, and one of them was infected after being purified and did not live for 2 years. The remaining 4 were lost due to illness or other reasons. After she entered the palace, she had been taking her with Aunt Mao. She was a steward aunt of Yeting Palace, but she was in poor health and was about to die. And Su Yu was the person she wanted to train to take over, and it was because of this that Su Yu had been in contact with many people in the past 2 years. These people are of course the same group. There are other people who are different from each other. Su Yu can know them. First, because she was young when she entered the palace, many people did not guard against her. But she is also smart, and she is very sensitive to her kind, so she feels the meticulous work of many other people in the palace. The second is because of Aunt Mao. Aunt Mao has been operating in the palace for many years, and of course she has discovered other fine works. She doesn't care who is behind those people, she only asks Su Yu to write it down. It's just that Aunt Mao calculated everything, and she pushed her out before Suyu would die before her. Aunt Mao was dragged onto the chair, and there was a lot of blood on her body. Yin Li walked in from outside and asked Tang He, "Are you still unwilling to speak?" Master Tang nodded. "The family members in her book are also fake." Yin Li glanced down at her and said with a blank face, "If you don't want to say it, forget it. Her real family may not still be there. Suyu has only been in the palace for a few years. Isn't the news you received all fake?" Aunt Mao, who had been quiet all the time, moved and raised her head slightly. "Tang," he said, "Suyu's Aunt Su was arrested. I think she should know more about the people behind the scenes than you do." Aunt Mao looked at him weakly and did not speak. Master Tang said slowly, "Suyu has a younger brother, you should know. The situation of her brother outside the palace was passed on to you first, and then you told her." Master Tang asked, "Let me think about it. How did they lie to her in the first place?" "Saying that her brother is living well, very good, to be a book boy for a young son. Can you marry a wife and have children in the future, or redeem yourself?" Aunt Mao said in a hoarse voice, "Her brother has been sent to the palace." "When did you know?" Aunt Mao said, "The first 2 years. She said, every month outside the palace will send news to the palace, including news of her brother, but I found out again that she is making underwear for people, and it is still a man. I thought she liked it somehow. Which bodyguard or housekeeper was there, and then I quietly saw that she didn't send out the underwear, but detoured to the Anfa gate more than once. I saw Suan, and the father-in-law who brought Suan and I together, found that they were a bit similar. We guessed that they were sisters and brothers, and the news sent from outside the palace was false." Master Tang asked, "Have you never thought about it? The news from your family is also fake." Aunt Mao, who had been reluctant to speak, shook her head and smiled, "I have no family. We are different from Suyu Suan. When we came to the palace, we had no family, but if we didn't obey, we would die very quickly, and later, we have done so much that we can't look back." She lowered her head and said, "Sir, I was about to die, so kill me if you want." Master Tang frowned, "Since you are about to die, why have you refused to admit who was behind the scenes?" Aunt Mao shook her head and said, "They are sorry for Suyu and Suan, but they are not sorry for me. I cannot betray the Lord." Tangdo was not very popular. Yin Li had already turned around and went out. Master Tang glanced at Aunt Mao, then turned and followed out. Yin Li said, "Focus on the Su family outside the palace. These people in the palace are either fake or no one in the family, but are there no people outside the palace? The list of Suyuji is very complicated." Although Yin Li is looking down all the way, the focus is on the master behind Suyu. Only by drawing a line can the entire net be pulled out. See you at 4 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1752. Several young people in Manbeo didn't know how far the case had progressed. After the initial stage, not only the Crown Prince, but also Master Tang and Yin Li deliberately stripped their participation. There was no way. Yin Li worked overtime in the palace for 3 consecutive days, and when he finally went home to take a shower and change clothes, he was told that there was one more person at home. Although he can shelter a palace slave, it does not mean that he is willing to have more trouble at home. It's just that the son has brought people home. What can he do? The palace was busy for several days, until Man Bao and the others rested, and Master Tang and the others were unable to leave the palace. At this moment, even if the news outside the palace was not well informed, they would realize that something was wrong. Mr. Zhuang, who had been silent, came to pick them up on the morning of their rest day. He also reached out and patted Manbeo on the head, and said with a smile, "It's snowing in Yangzhou, and your Zhuangzi has been built. We think let's go and enjoy the snow in Zhuangzi, let's go and relax." When Manbao heard this, his eyes brightened and he asked, "Are my parents going too?" Mr. Zhuang nodded with a smile, "When I went out, They were already going out of the city gate to wait. We will meet them directly at the city gate. Man Bao immediately put the medicine box and book basket in his hand into the carriage. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang were also excited, and they stuffed things into the carriage, and then dragged their horses to go up. Yin Or and Lu Huan, who were standing aside, looked at them enviously. Man Bao saw Wei Dun and asked the two, "Do you want to play? There are many rooms in my village. If it's not enough, we can also squeeze together, which is very convenient." Lu Huan really wanted to go, but he didn't dare, so he shook his head after hesitating for a while. Forget it the first time. If he comes again, he will definitely be beaten, and I'm afraid his grandmother will not be able to come forward. Yin Or also wanted to go. He hesitated for a while, then nodded, "Okay, but you have to wait for me. I have to go home and talk to my grandmother first." Chang Xiao, who came to pick up Yin Or, opened his mouth, but still didn't say anything. Mrs. Yin is not as restrained as before, especially when it has been determined that Yin Lai Uniang will recruit her, and Yin Or travel will have little impact on the body. The three of Bai Shan guessed that he would definitely come if he wanted to, so they agreed to meet him at the gate of the city. So they jumped on the horse, kicked the horse's stomach and ran away. Yin He watched the three of them run out on horseback for a while, then smiled, and supported Chang Xiao's hand into the car and said, "Let's go. Go home first." Yin He didn't take his book basket out of the car when he got home, but asked Chang Xiao to bring Suan out, while he himself went to resign with his grandmother. Mrs. Yin was happy that her grandson Chiumu was going home, and when she heard that he was going out to play and might have to stay for 2 days, she persuaded a little reluctantly, "It's cold now, it's very cold in Zhuangzi, you can eat and play whatever you want, and it's the same at home." Yin He said softly, "My grandson actually just wants to see the snow scene outside the capital. I've grown up so much, and I haven't seen what the snow scene outside the capital is like." He paused and then said, "And it's not far from Yangzhou. It's very convenient to be able to go back and forth in half a day. If my grandmother really misses me, when the time comes, ask someone to send me a letter, and I'll be back." Even if Mrs. Yin thought about him, she wouldn't toss him like that. Seeing that he was gentle but persistent, she knew that it would be difficult to change the child's mind. Mainly, Yin Or's request just scratched her heart. In the past, this child was very sensible and well behaved. He would do whatever the family asked him to do, and would not do anything if he was not allowed to do it, but he didn't have much popularity. He is not so obedient now, but his body is full of vitality. Mrs. Yin didn't say it, but she was actually very relieved. After thinking about it, she nodded and agreed, "Bring a few more people, it's icy and snowy, and it's not enough to bring only one longevity. I asked Chang Xiao to bring Suan with me." "That's not enough," said Mrs. Yin, "they are both young, what's the use of them? I'll ask the housekeeper to assign you a few guards to take with you." Yin probably didn't object. Anyway, every time he went out to a farther place, he would send many people to follow him. So when he got to the front yard, there were already 6 guards waiting with their horses. Chang Xiao and Suan stood on the side of the carriage with their hands down. They helped him into the carriage before they climbed into the carriage. Suan can't drive the car, so he has been paying attention to how Chang Xiao drives the car. By the time they reached the city gate, Man Bao and the others had already eaten a bowl of dumplings at a roadside stall, and they had also found a place to change into warmer clothes and another cape. They also drank a bowl of mutton soup, and their foreheads were still sweating, which was warm. Seeing the arrival of the Yin family's carriage, the 4 teachers and students did not move. They sat on the booth and waved to Chang Xiao and Suan, who were on the carriage, and asked, "Do you want to drink a bowl of sheep soup before leaving?" Yin He opened the curtains, looked down at them from the car, and was speechless. "Didn't we leave the palace after breakfast?" Man Bao was a little sleepy, and replied with a blank expression, "There is no sheep soup in the palace, or the sheep soup outside the palace is delicious. Would you like a bowl? After drinking it, it's good to go on the road. Yin or. He looked around and asked, what about your family and Bai Shan's family? Man Bao said, their carriages will leave first, and we will catch up on horseback in a while. Because only the four of them, master and apprentice, wanted to eat dumplings and drink mutton soup, the others left first. Yin or hesitated for a while, but couldn't resist the temptation, then let me have a bowl of sheep soup too. He didn't dare to eat dumplings, he had already eaten breakfast, and he had to hold on to it. It was a quarter of an hour before the group set off on the road. The three who originally wanted to ride a horse ended up cramming into a car with Yin or, and the four of them sat in the car together and yawned. Bai Shan said, Sir, you are right, if you eat too much, you will definitely feel sleepy. Yin or slightly lifted his eyelids and said, you said it too late. Then the three of them looked at Man Bao, you are a doctor, why didn't you stop us? Man Bao said in a daze, you should stock up on fat in winter, why stop it? It's okay, it's the same when we come back and ride again. Yin or very suspicious, they are so gluttonous, can they really not eat when they come back? After walking for more than half an hour, the group caught up with Lao Zhutu and the others in front. They opened the curtains and looked back, and they were very satisfied when they saw that the three Manbao were not riding horses, but were sitting in the car, that is to say, what kind of horse is riding in this cold day, how good is it to ride in a carriage? But Mrs. Lu and Mama Lu smiled and said, these children must be sleepy after eating too much. Let the carriage go a little slower, and it will be bumpy. They should be uncomfortable in a while. Madame Lu responded with a smile. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1753. The snow scene in the Grange is very different from that in the capital. A group of people got off the carriage and looked up. The endless fields were all white, and the mountains in the distance were half green and half snowy. Not to mention Yin or, even the well-informed Bai Shan and the three watched, standing on the side of the road without moving for a while. Old Zhutu, who got out of the car, twisted his waist and saw the four children standing silently on the side of the road without saying a word. Zhou Lijun, who jumped out of the car on the other side, also looked at the white snow and howled. He couldn't help but turn his head to take a look. He really couldn't see what was so beautiful about it, so he turned his head and asked Jianxi, what is so beautiful about this snow? Jianxi was also looking at Shuexing, and when she heard the words, she glanced at him and said, seeing Shuexing is good looking. Chu Hulang also felt happy. After watching for a while, he bumped into Mingxiu and asked with a smile, Brother Xiang, do you think it would be similar to this place if it snowed on the grassland? Xiangming learned, although I've never seen snow fall on the grassland, but I heard people say that the snow in the deep winter is much heavier on the grassland than here, and in some places the snow can't reach a person's chest. Thursday Lang was speechless, so powerful. Xiangming Xiu nodded, so if the grassland encounters a snowstorm, not only will the cattle and horses freeze to death, but some wolves and wild cattle and horses will also fall into the snow pit and drown to death. Old Zhutu had already greeted everyone to hurry into the house, it was too cold outside. Zhuangzi has already been built. There are 2 front and rear entrances, but one row has 3 courtyards, so there are only 6 courtyards, not to mention the space surrounded by the walls on both sides. The group entered Zhuangzi, and Man Bao went straight to the yard on the backside of the mountain, where he planned to live. Not only is there a large open space, but there is also a door on the side connected to the outside, which can be opened to see the water, and the mountain can be seen when looking up. However, the old Zhutu disliked the cold water near there, and seeing the children running around, he simply dragged Jian to occupy the main courtyard. It doesn't matter to Zhou Dalan and Xiao Qian's family. They are used to living with their parents, so they naturally moved their luggage to the main courtyard. Man Bao rushed into that yard and has already chosen a place for himself. I will live here, my husband will live there, my parents will live in the main yard, and Grandma Lu and the others can live in the yard in front of us. Mrs. Lu also likes landscapes, she nodded with a smile when she heard the words, and turned to Madame Lu, send all their things to this yard, we live in the first yard. Zhou Lijun and the others also chose their own places. Anyway, Zhuangzi is big enough and the room is enough. Anyway, I only stayed for 2 days. I don't know when I will stay next time. They took their luggage back to their respective rooms and put them down, then shook their hands and started to run out. Lao Zhutu hurriedly stopped them, don't go out to play, there is a lot of wheat in the fields, you can play in the snow and kill me. What should I do if my wheat is stepped on? He said again, don't you see so many people at home? Go up the mountain to pick up some firewood. If it's not enough, go to the village and borrow some from others. In such a cold day, if there's not enough firewood, it will kill you. Not to mention Zhou Lijun, even Man Bao dared not run out to play, so he planned to go up the mountain to pick up firewood. Old Zhou turned his head and saw them, but changed his smile, you go up the mountain to wear thicker clothes, bring your sickle, chop some wood if you can't find it, come down when you get tired, your sister-in-law and the others have started cooking. It won't be long before lunch. A few people took the sickle and went to the next hill together. Bai Erlang threw the knife to cut off the road blocking grass, I thought your father would let us go out to play, so we won't let us go up the mountain. Man Bao said, you think beautifully. Listening to my fourth brother, my father started talking about the lack of firewood when he was halfway through the road. It was the first time for Yin or so grown up to go up the mountain to pick up firewood, which was very novel. He was wearing thick clothes. Originally, he felt a little cold in his hands and feet when he was in the car, but he didn't feel cold when he walked. It was because his clothes were too thick and heavy, so he was a little out of breath. Seeing that they were pulling the light snow on the ground with sickles and wooden sticks, Chu Hulang didn't look like they were looking for firewood, so he stepped forward and grabbed the sickles from their hands, and waved his hands with disgust, you guys can play, I'm coming here. Don't, said Bai Shan, who was having a little fun with the snow crunching, Thursday brother, we will pick up firewood. We did this when we were young. Man Bao, who also likes to step on the snow, nodded again and again. I know you've done it, but you see how clean the ground is, does it look like there's ready-made firewood for us to pick up? Hurry up and get out, let's cut some branches. Bai Erlang said, this is all raw, even if it is cut, it can't be used immediately, right? So you can go down the mountain to play, and by the way, borrow some firewood from the people in the village. We chop it and pull it back to dry in the shade, and we can use it next time. Xiang Mingxiu nodded, took out a piece of grey sackcloth around his hand, and took the scythe from Bai Erlang's hand, go and play. Zhou Lijun rolled his eyes, fourth uncle, then we also went down the mountain. Thursday Lang glanced at her and said, I'm too lazy, you stay behind and drag the branches. Zhou Lijun. Chu Yulang continued to talk, how old are you, can you look like a big girl, brother Xiang, this guest is working, are you embarrassed to go and play? Zhou Lijun. As soon as Man Bao heard this, he pulled Bai Shan and was about to run. Bai Shan slipped and almost fell. He subconsciously tugged at the tree next to him before he could stabilize his body. The snow on the tree slammed down, smashing the people under the tree on their heads. The snow, Bai Shan was also smashed, but he was not affected much. Seeing this, he immediately stood up and pulled Man Bao and ran away. Man Bao laughed happily. Thursday Lang was in a hurry and roared, Bai Shan. Bai Erlang also pulled Yin or ran down the mountain. When the four of them came down the mountain, Yin he couldn't breathe, and he bent down to pant slightly, but his face was full of smiles. After Man Bale was over, seeing that Zhou Liru and Zhou Lixiu had also gone to other places to find firewood, she pointed to the direction of the village in front of her and said, "Let's move in the direction of the village, rush." It is impossible to rush, not only to take care of Yin Or, but also because there is some ice on the road, so you can't run, and you will slip and fall. Chang Shao was very nervous, and he and Suan supported Yin Or alone, for fear that he would fall. While walking, Man Bao stretched out his feet to stamp the thin layer of ice on the side of the road, and said, "Why don't they clear the ice? What if they fall?" Bai Shan glanced at the distance between the village and here and said, "I have already left the village. Very few people come here in the winter, and it is not easy to distribute, so I didn't clean it. See you at 11 o'clock. It was supposed to be timed, but I accidentally went out." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1754. Sure enough, there was less ice on the ground at the entrance of the village, and there were obvious marks of being shoveled on the road in the middle, but it was not particularly clean. But when you step on it, you won't feel like you will fall at any moment. It was cold at the moment, and not many people in the village were outside, but they knew that there were many carriages and horses coming from the Zhou family's village outside the village. When Manbao and the others arrived at the entrance of the village, it happened that the Li Jing had to go out to find them. "It's nothing serious, just ask hello, after all, the villagers are all tenants of the Zhou family, aren't they?" As soon as he saw Manbao and a few people, the chief immediately stepped forward and saluted, "See Sir Zhou." Manbao hurriedly returned the gift. The other party was very old, she didn't dare to accept the gift in vain. The lieutenant smiled, "Master Zhou, is the whole family here to play in Zhuangzi?" Manbao smiled and nodded, "I heard that it snowed in Yangzhou 2 days ago, so let's enjoy the snow." The rear didn't know what to reward the white snow. "Doesn't it snow every year?" However, he still greeted him with a smile. Now that they met, Manbao naturally asked about the situation in the village. "Have all the eggs given to you hatched chicks?" The lieutenant smiled and answered yes and said, "Everyone is very attentive. As long as the hatched chicks are raised in the house at the moment, they eat and drink like people. This is of course impossible, and chickens are still worse than people." Manbao was very satisfied with this, and asked about the spring planting next year. "Is it time to prepare the grain seeds? Is the village going to replace the new grain seeds this year, or use the ones left at home?" The mayor said, "We thought about picking out the best part from our own family, and then buying some new grain seeds from the county to replace them. We said before that this grain." "I'll pay half of the money," Manbao said. "I know, I'll ask someone to go to the grain store in the city and look carefully to see if there are any particularly good grains." The long table smiled and responded, "Talking to people who knew how to farm would be a peace of mind." Manbao finally asked about the winter, such as whether the villagers prepared enough firewood. As soon as the chief said that everyone was prepared, and that the preparations were quite adequate, Manbao immediately proposed that he wanted to buy some firewood from the villagers. "If you want her to say, it's only a few dozen pennies, so why borrow it, just buy it directly." Bai Shan thought so too. The chief has been thinking about the smell, and they came to the village to buy firewood. But everyone in the village is Zhou Man's tenants. She has requirements, not to mention buying and lending, she asks directly, and the tenant farmers can only give. The lieutenant hesitated for a while, and decided to form a good relationship, so he smiled and said, "Isn't it just firewood, it's not worth much, where can I buy it? In this way, I'll take out a few bundles from my house, and I'll send them to other houses. One piece is enough." Manbao declined, "It's far from the mountains and forests, and we have to walk a long way to get firewood. How can we just take everyone's things?" Seeing her sincerity, the lieutenant simply pointed it out and said, "It's not a valuable thing. Besides, Master Joe didn't ask for grass this year, and everyone has less work to cut grass, so we have time to collect so much firewood. We should give the firewood in the village." Only then did Man Bao remember the pasture. In previous years, the tenants in the village had to provide pasture to the chief officer of the field. However, there are not many horses in their family, and there are quite a few mules, but the former has always been raised by Bai Shan and his family, and they use the best grain and grass, and they don't look down on the grass here. The latter is in charge of Shu Yulang, and I don't know where he got so much hay. Anyway, the mule is not thin, and he can still earn a lot of money every day. In the end, at the insistence of the chief, Man Bao accepted the 20 bundles of firewood he had collected and sent them to the village by the villagers. As soon as the old Zhutu heard that it was a free gift, he was very happy, and then he accepted their love and said to Zhou Dalan and his wife, "Don't say, although they are lazy, they are not bad people. Wei, except don't let them be too lazy, anything else, it's a good thing to help." Zhou Dalan responded and asked, "Father, shall we go back tomorrow afternoon?" "Why don't you go back here?" Old Zhou said. If Mr. Zhuang said that Man Bao was in a bad mood, he wanted to come out to see the snow, climb the mountain to relax, and I wouldn't go out on this cold day. Zhou Dalan didn't really want to go back. "I have discussed with my mother, and I want to stay in the village to raise some chickens and ducks," he said. "While we are free now, let's buy some eggs and duck eggs to hatch, and then tidy up the other unorganized areas in the village." The main reason is that their husband and wife would help out on the east side of the capital, and follow the helpers in the west side, and they were very idle. So Xiaoqian's meaning is, it's better to live in Zhuangzi, have something to do, wait for the parents and children, and then go back to the capital, it's not far away anyway. The old Zhutu was thinking, and Zhou Dalan continued to talk. She still wants to pickle some dried vegetables, as well as fish, meat, etc. The house over there in the capital looks very good, and there are occasional guests at home. If it is on the eaves, I'm afraid it's not good to dry the meat. Old Jotio you remembered the bacon, sausage and all kinds of bacon and cured meat made by his eldest daughter-in-law, and immediately nodded, "Okay, then you all stay." After thinking about it, he said, "Let's stay with you." Anyway, when he went back to the capital, he also went to the restaurant to help. There was not much to do, and after Man Bao went back, he had to go to the palace, and he had to meet on the 8th day of the next month, so he thought about it and said, "I'll ask Arya and me for some more money, let's go buy some meat and vegetables and come back and sit down. This year we are in the capital for Chinese New Year, and there are quite a few people eating." Thinking of buying vegetables, Lao Zhutu complained, "We came here too late and forgot to grow vegetables. In the future, we will still have to grow the vegetables ourselves. By the way, is there any place in Zhuangzi where we can grow vegetables?" Man Bao, who was sitting obediently waiting to eat, immediately interjected, "Father, there needs to be more space in this village for me to grow things." Old Jotio you asked, "Grow the weeds you dug out from outside." "Why is it a weed?" "Maybe it's a medicine," Man Bao said. "Everything in the world can be used as medicine." "Li R, you just said that Manager Zheng has contacted me with a batch of medicines, and I want to try it in Zhuangzi. One of a kind. Some are also grown in the houses in the capital. They are grown separately, and the survival rate is a little higher." This was collected by the pharmacist with a lot of effort by Manager Zheng. Of course, in addition to the medicines given by Manager Zheng, there are also things she is interested in buying from the mall, as well as things dug out from outside. People come and go in the big mansion in the capital. She doesn't dare to plant things in the mall, but Zhuangzi is basically her own family, and her elder brother and sister-in-law take care of it personally. She is very relieved, so she plans to find something novel. Plant. For example, Keek said that grain seeds that cannot inherit the second generation of good genes. It's the end of the month, ask for a monthly pass. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1755. Because they arrived late and there were many people, Xiao Jian and Aunt Rong discussed it and decided to make soup pots for everyone. The servants in the kitchen and Mr. Fang washed and broke the cabbage brought from the city, while MRSGN and Aunt Rong chopped up the bones and boiled them in a large pot, while adding various spices. Man Bao and the others were sitting outside talking at first. After smelling the aroma, they couldn't help but find the big kitchen. It happened that Zhou Lejun and a few brothers were dragging the cut branches back, and as soon as they smelled the aroma, they said, "I'll give it to you. Auntie, help, you can drag it up the mountain by yourself." Zhou Liwei couldn't help but complain, "Second sister, are you helping out with your skills, or making trouble? You're not as good as me." "Shut up, I can't cook, can't I wash? Where's the dishes to wash at the moment?" Zhou Lejun had already left them and ran away. Zhou Lizhong reached out and patted his shoulder and said, "Let's go, don't think about being lazy. In fact, there are still a lot of dishes to wash in the kitchen." When Xiao Jian's family came to the capital from Qilai village, they brought a lot of soaked bamboo shoots and dried vegetables. There is still a lot left at the moment. In addition to the cabbage stored in the cellar some time ago, Xiao Jian also kept the cucumbers sent from the Beijia Zhuangzi in the cellar. Apart from being softer, the cucumbers that were taken out were almost the same as fresh ones when cut, and even the fragrance became more intense, which was not bad. Even Mrs. Lu was surprised. They were all stored in a vat and stored in the same way. However, the cucumbers saved by Xiao Jian were fresher, more tender, and less prone to spoilage than those saved by Aunt Rong. "Soup pot, I still need more vegetables." They took out these dried vegetables, soaked them and washed them, and also washed and sliced the cucumbers, soaked some dried yam slices, washed and sliced the lotus roots they bought before. If it weren't for the time limit, Xiao Jian would like to make some tofu or make some bean sprouts. Speaking of this, she couldn't help but said to He Lejun, who was sitting on the small stool washing vegetables, "I asked, there is no stone mill in the village, and we have to prepare a stone mill ourselves to make tofu in the future." Man Bao said, "Buy one." Xiao Jian was tangled, "But it's just too wasteful for our own use. This is not in our village. I also make tofu every day for use in the store or for takeout. This is what I eat at home." After thinking about it, Bai Shan said, "We can build a shed next to our house to make the ground stronger so that the people in the village can use it. Not only will it be lively, but the elder brother and elder sister-in-law will be more integrated into everyone." Bai Shan immediately confronted Jun and said, "Buy one." Lejun washed and picked up the soaked dry vegetables, and said, "Little aunt, you have to ask grandpa. Now grandpa has to check my account twice a day. Although she still holds the money and the ledger, Lao Zhutu will ask who has paid her money in the morning, and how much he has spent today in the evening." Yin Or, who curiously broke off the mud on the lotus root, couldn't help but ask, "Is stone grinding expensive?" Man Bao nodded, "It's precious, and the stone is better. In Lujiang County, it is estimated that it will cost about 800 yuan. I don't know how much it will cost here." Zhou Lejun also nodded, "In the past, my aunt wanted to add one to my aunt in the store, but my grandfather thought it was expensive." Yin may be a little confused, 800 yuan, is it very expensive? When Bai Erlang saw that he had peeled the mud off the lotus root, he was going to use a knife to cut the head and wash it, and quickly stopped him with "Oops, oops," and said, "Wash it once before cutting the head, otherwise the dirty water will flow into it." Mr. Fang just broke up the cabbage, and when he turned around, he saw a few people washing such a small amount of vegetables and making the ground wet, so he couldn't help waving them away. "Why are you here to help? You're just here to make trouble, get out, go out, I have to clean up the kitchen for you in a while. The maid and mother-in-law, who kept their heads down and cleaned things honestly, didn't dare to speak, but in fact they thought so too. Man Bao handed the washed cucumber to Bai Shan, watched him cut the cucumber with a few knives, and said to Mrs. Fang, "We washed it clean." Fang looked at the 2-finger-wide cucumber cut out by Bai Shan and remained silent. If this thing is cut like this, they won't be able to cut it again for a while. Bai Shan has tried his best to control the slicing, but this kind of thing was done by Daji in the past. At most, he burned fire, but he said solemnly, "Fourth sister-in-law, it's good to eat a large piece of cucumber." Mrs. Fang said, "How long does it take to cook this?" Bai Shan, "You can eat it raw." Yin he looked at the pile of cucumbers with a tangled face and whispered, "I think cooked ones are better." Man Bao said directly, "I don't like to eat cucumbers, I like to eat lotus roots." Olds Hu took came in from the outside with a big winter melon in his arms, put it on the ground, and said to a group of people in the room, "This is from the head of the house, wash and cut it together, and I also invited the head of the house over for dinner." Although they are already familiar with them, they are foreigners after all, and they always have to have a good relationship with the villagers and chiefs here. There are too many villagers, so let's have a good relationship with the chiefs first. Mr. Fang responded in place of everyone, and when the father-in-law left, he immediately slammed all the teenagers out of the kitchen. Man Bao immediately washed his hands and went out with the crowd, and then sighed, "It's estimated that it will take 2 or 3/4 of an hour to eat. I'm really hungry." Bai Shan also sighed, "Fortunately we ate an extra breakfast in the morning, otherwise we would be even more hungry." Bai Erlang nodded along with Man Bao, deeply agreeing. Yin or. Since they were not allowed to help in the kitchen, and they were not needed for chopping wood on the mountain, they decided to set up a table. With so many people, it is of course impossible to eat at one table. One table for adults and one table for young people. Even Daji and the others set up 2 tables in the side room. When Xiaoqian's family boiled the soup base, Fang's family also cut up all the vegetables and meat. Everyone took it to the table and ate it directly while talking. It was the first time that Yin he had grown up to eat such a soup pot. Because of his illness, his food had always been exquisite. The family occasionally tried to accommodate him. He knew that his grandmother often asked the small kitchen to cook big meat for her. Because of this, he didn't even like to eat with his family. To eat a meal with him, all the 8 people except him have to eat another meal. Why not? It is better for him to eat it by himself. They are comfortable, and he is also comfortable. Man Bao was sitting on the chair, and seeing Chang Shao and Suan were still standing with their hands down, he waved, "You and Daji go down to dinner, Yin, or we will take care of it." Chang Shao and Suan looked at Yin Or. Yin Or returned to his senses and nodded slightly, "You all go." Chang Shao then pulled Suan to salute and stepped back. Bai Shan also took good care of Yin Or, and first served him a bowl of soup to warm his stomach. Bai Erlang couldn't help pouting when he saw that the 2 were so considerate to him, but he didn't seem to be able to see him. He put the bowl between Bai Shan and Zhou Man, and the 2 looked up at him with inexplicable expressions. Why? Next update around 4 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1756. Bai Erlang's eyes fell on the soup they gave Yin Or. Yin Or pursed his lips and smiled, pushed his bowl of soup over and gave it to him. "I'll give you this bowl." Bai Erlang glanced at it, stretched out his hand and took it generously. Bai Shan shook his head, took Bai Er's bowl and filled Yin Or a bowl of soup. He turned to look at Man Bao and asked, "Do you want soup?" Man Bao immediately shook his head, "I want to eat with my stomach." Bai Erlang, who was drinking with gusto, regretted for a moment. Yes, he was very full after drinking soup, but he was not like Yin or. He couldn't eat more, and he couldn't eat more. Everyone had a lively lunch that was very late, and basically there was no need to eat at night. Man Bao said to Xiao Qian, sister-in-law, I'll have a bowl of bamboo shoot noodles tonight. Bai Shan also immediately said, I also want bamboo shoots noodles. Bai Erlang said, I'll add more diced radishes. Madame Lu smiled and said, then let the kitchen give you a bowl of noodles later. Man Bao ordered it for Yin or, Yin, let's just eat noodles in clear soup. My sister-in-law's order is also delicious. Qian couldn't help laughing, she nodded her forehead and said, after eating one meal, I am thinking about the next meal. Mr. Zhuang couldn't help laughing, and called a few people, I've just eaten enough, it's not good to go out to chase the wind, you come to the tea room, we sit and talk, and when the sleepiness is over, you can go out for a walk. The four of them followed Mr. Zhuang to the tea room honestly. MRSGN was about to clean up the tableware, and seeing Zhou Lixiu still sitting blankly, he also nodded his forehead and whispered, what a fool, Mr. Zhuang and your sister-in-law are drinking tea, you won't go and help boil the water to make the tea. She said, take your fourth brother and Shuping, and hurry over there. Zhou Lixiu got up dumbfounded, pulled Zhou Ligu and Bai Shuping, and the three ran to chase after Mr. Zhuang and the others. Daji and the others had already put away the tableware and chopsticks. When they saw their son when they went out, they knew that they would wait behind Mr. Zhuang and the young master, and nodded with satisfaction. But after entering the tea room, they didn't need to do anything at all. Bai Shan and Man Bao brought a large pot of water by themselves, while Bai Erlang greeted them to surround the wooden couch and seats in the tea room. Man Bao and the others brought the water back, put the stove in the corner of the house, and started to make a fire to boil the water. They were all experienced in lighting the fire, so they lit the charcoal at once. In order to keep the line of sight, the door was only closed on the side facing them, and the windows were all open. Although there was only snow in the garden outside, there was nothing else viewable. As soon as the water boiled, everyone let out a sigh of relief and sat down on the wooden couch. Bai Shan shifted his butt, it's still a bit cold, so I should put some skin on it. Zhou Lixiu was not so particular, and looked at Mr. Zhuang with his chin up, sir, are you going to give a lecture to the aunt and the others? Mr. Zhuang laughed and asked, why, do you want to go to class? Zhou Lixiu immediately shook his head. After shaking his head, he found that such behavior was not good, so he added, Mr. naturally wants to listen to his lectures. Man Bao couldn't help but glance at him, smoother. Bai Erlang nodded in agreement, that's right. Zhou Lixiu ignored the two of them and still looked at Mr. Zhuang. Mr. Zhuang smiled and said, it's not in class, just talk and treat it as a wake-up call. He paused for a while and said to Man Bao, I wanted to bring you all to climb the mountain, but I see that the mountain is humid and cold now, so it's fine for everyone to sit and talk. In fact, seeing that they are having a good time today, it seems that he has forgotten the downturn of this period, and he is too lazy to take them up the mountain again. Walking on the mountain road in snowy days is not only difficult to walk, but also dangerous. Mr. Zhuang asked with a smile, do you guys build a snowman tomorrow? Man Bao, who was planning to do so, nodded again and again with excitement in their eyes, sir, are you going with me? Mr. Zhuang smiled and said, I'll just look at it, you can stack one for me too. Even Zhou Lixiu said there was no problem. Everyone gathered together and talked about eating, drinking, and having fun, and spent the time happily. It was not until evening that Mr. Zhuang pointed to the sunset and said to her, although the sunset is beautiful, we all know that it is not far from the dark when it appears, and it will always have only one result, and the morning sun is better than it, because there is still a whole day after the morning sun, it may be windy and snowy, or it may be sunny, and there are infinite possibilities. Possible. Everyone was confused, Mr. Zhuang said softly, and you are the morning sun, the teacher, and those people are old, it's all sunset. Man Bao and Bai Shan instantly understood what Mr. Zhuang meant, and Yin he also pondered, only Bai Erlang scratched his head and looked around, and then stared at Zhou Lixiu and the others who were also confused. Fortunately, he knew more than they did. Bai Erlang always insisted on things he didn't understand and kept asking Bai Shan and Zhou Man afterwards. Under normal circumstances, if there is no major event, the husband will not deliberately say such things to them. He felt that these words were words of encouragement, so when the husband left, he turned his head and asked Man Bao, "Mr. is complimenting us?" Man Bao said, "It's encouraging, not boasting." She said, "But Mr. is not the setting Sunday." Bai Shan, "Yes, that's the most beautiful one." Man Bao, "Yes, some sunsets are as bright as oranges, and some are as ugly as mosquito blood." So Bai Shan told her bad things about those people are not like mosquito blood, they are all black, just like before the heavy rain. Man Bao, "It's still the smelly rain." Bai Shan, "Yes, the stench is endless." Yin or, so his little friend is such a little friend. Zhou Lixiu was confused, turned his head and asked Bai Erlang, who offended them, and who are they talking bad about? Mr. Zhuang's words were too subtle, but Bai Shan and Man Bao made it clear, and they knew who they were talking about before they scolded the first sentence Bai Erlang, although he didn't know who it was, so he could only represent praise, a bunch of bad guys. Zhou Lixiu broke the casserole and asked, "Who is that?" Bai Erlang said with a deep face, "If I want to know who it is, then I can be Tang Xuexiang's official." Hearing this, Bai Shan turned his head and said, "Are you dreaming?" Man Bao said, "You have to work hard for at least another 20 years. Bai Erlang was reluctant, "Why, I am also very good at studying now, and the waiter complimented me last time." Because Tang Xuexiang is not too young now, Man Bao said, "Can you still be better than Tang Xuexiang?" Bai Erlang thought for a while, then shook his head willingly and admitted that he was not as good as the other party. "So if you want to be a 6th rank official, it will take at least 20 years. Man Bao thought about it for a while, he said with a smile, "I am now a 6th rank official, and I am half a level higher than Tang Xuexiang." Woolen cloth. Bai Shan remembered something and asked, "Are you going to the big court the day after tomorrow? Are you sitting with Brother Tang? See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1757. Man Bao stayed for a while, and then she remembered this matter. "Yes, I just said it last month. She has to attend the grand meeting." After a while, Man Bao closed his mouth and said, "It's all right, I don't have anything to do when I go, I guess I'll just listen to their discussions." Bai Shan thinks about it too, she is just an editor and rarely uses her speech. So everyone also discussed that it was time to go out and build a snowman the next day. There was such a thick snow in the field, they found a clearing, the snow looked white, so they took a shovel and went forward. Of course, a shovel must be used to build a snowman. Only a fool can use his hands. When he arrived in the capital last year, Man Bao saw such a big snow for the first time. It froze instantly. Later, I stupidly built a snowman with my hands, and was made fun of by the children in the alley, and then I didn't build the snowman. The experienced Man Bao trio skillfully instructed everyone to use a shovel to shovel the snow and pat the snow. Even Yin Or was the first time he saw it, walking around crunching in the snow in his boots. A group of people built 3 snowmen on the ground, with different shapes, some with big stomachs, and some with square heads. Everyone couldn't help laughing. Zhou Lijun ran to the side of the road and picked up a few black stones, which he pressed directly into the snowman's forehead as eyes. Then press it in as the snowman's mouth. When I took 2 steps back and looked at it, I felt terrified no matter how I looked at it. After they dressed up the three snowmen, Thursday Lang and the others came to watch the fun, and then shook their heads and said, "If anyone passes by here at night, it will scare people to death." Man Bao decided to ignore him. Anyway, she felt that the snowman was still all right. Unfortunately, they have to go back to the capital, so they can't stay for long. So in the end, after watching the snowman for a while, they went back to Zhuangzi for lunch, and then left to go back to Beijing. Old Zhu Tu and Jian decided to take Zhou Dalan and his wife to stay, and Shai Zuolang was not in a hurry to go back. He planned to go to Yangzhou City in the next 2 days. The furs on the grassland began to be shipped. He and Xiang Mingxiu both planned to do another fur business this year. Zhou Lijun planned to meet the world with them, so the others followed Man Bao and the others back to Beijing, and then went about their own business. It was the first time for Man Bao to attend the great ceremony, so he had to get up earlier than usual. In addition, the sun was short, the sky was getting dark quickly, but the light was late. Not only that, but he was also very sleepy and liked to lie in the warm blanket. Can't get up. Even though Man Bao had asked Keek to remind her to get up in advance, she still opened and closed her eyes, then slipped into the quilt and fell asleep again. Keek noticed that he was speechless for a while, and was about to continue calling her when he scanned Bai Shan drowsily walking over in a cloak, and he immediately stopped intervening. Bai Shan was also sleepy. He walked to Man Bao's door, raised his hand and knocked on the door. Seeing that there was no movement inside, he knocked again and said, "I know you're awake, get up quickly, or you'll be late for a while." Man Bao rolled up the quilt and shouted, "I don't want to get up." Bai Shan said, "If you are impeached by the censor, you will have at least 1 month's salary." Man Bao was depressed for a while, and finally sat up holding the quilt, sighed deeply, then lifted the quilt and got out of bed, smeared the light and turned on the light. Seeing that the light was on, Bai Shan nodded in satisfaction, turned around and said, "Then hurry up, I'll call Bai Er." Man Bao asked in a daze, "What do you want him to do?" Bai Shan said, "Blessings are shared, and difficulties are shared." Man Bao just listened to it without thinking. She sat on the chair blankly, but still felt that the chair was too hard, so she sat back on the bed. As soon as she sat on the bed, she felt soft and comfortable, she couldn't help lying down. Coco. Feeling that her breathing was getting longer and longer, she seemed to fall asleep again. It was speechless for a while, and when she was about to remind her, she suddenly raised her head, directly stretched out her hand and patted her cheek twice, and said to herself, "I can't sleep, I can't sleep, I can't sleep, my head is hanging from the beam." Seeing that the host left the bed with difficulty, Keek stopped talking. It seems that in order not to regret it, Man Bao didn't even pack the bed, so he put on his clothes and went out to fetch water with a wooden basin. The people in the kitchen woke up early. They were always the first to get up in the house. The other servants in the house also started to work. He stepped forward to take the wooden basin and said, "Miss Man, why didn't you wait for me to deliver water?" Man Bao shook his head and said, "I'll just do it myself, I'll have a lot of energy." Girl. Man Bao drank water and returned to the house, washed his face and hands first, and then he was completely awake. When she took care of herself and went to Bai Shan, she found that he had already sat at the dinner table with Mr. Zhuang Bai Erlang, and the 3 master and apprentice were waiting for her to eat. After saluting his husband, Man Bao asked, "Why do you all get up so early?" Mr. Zhuang said with a smile, "I'm getting older, I feel less." Bai Shan smiled and said, "I slept early last night, and I woke up early today." Bai Erlang sat without speaking. The light was dim, and Man Bao leaned over to look, only to find that Bai Erlang had his eyes closed and his head lowered, and he could hear a gentle snoring if he listened carefully. Bai Shan rubbed him with his elbow. Bai Erlang trembled and almost fell. He immediately sat upright, and said in a daze, "Blessings are shared, and difficulties are shared. Man Bao always felt that these words were familiar, and seemed to have heard them this morning. She turned to look at Bai Shan. Bai Shan directly put a bun for her and said, "The court meeting will last for a long time. You should stop eating porridge, eat more stuff like buns and steamed buns, and drink less water." Man Bao nodded, picked up the steamed bun and ate it. When they went out, the genius was slightly bright, and there was no one on the street. Man Bao couldn't help dozing off in the swaying carriage, and so did Bai Shan and Bai Erlang. She was still very moved today. "Next time you don't have to get up early with me, it's not worth it to be so early." Bai Erlang nodded again and again, "Okay, okay." Bai Shan glanced at him and said, "It's okay, I'll send you off in the future, anyway, I'll go to court in the future." Bai Erlang woke up a little and said, "You are so conceited." "Bai Shan, this is called self-confidence. I need 20 years. Even if you are better than me, it will take at least 10 years. After 10 years, Man Bao may not only go to the big court meeting. Humph, let's see what you will do when the time comes." Man Bao thought about it for a while and shook his head. "Although the bigger the official, the more salary and the more work fields, but I think it's better not to be too big. I'm so tired that I don't have time to do other things." "Son, the highest imperial doctor is the 4th grade hospital. She needs to take care of so many things, so she is not inappropriate. The other officials have a lot of things to manage when their grades are high, and it's not about treating illnesses and saving people. She doesn't like them very much, and they take up time, so it's fine now." After queuing up to enter the great hall and finding his own seat to sit down, Man Bao felt even more that she was a very good official, because the position of the points was very good. "See you tomorrow, he, I have something to do tonight, so I can't add more." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 1758. Only those with the 6th rank and above have the right and responsibility to participate in the Grand Court meeting. Man Bao is a 5th rank and belongs to the minor officials. There are only a few 6th rank officials behind her. She was supposed to be at the door. Being young, he was placed in the first few columns. Her position was in the 4th column of the penultimate row, only 1 row away from the window. Fortunately, in winter, the windows are closed, so even if it is a little ventilated, the official uniform is tightly closed and the hand is folded, and it does not feel so cold. Man Bao sat down in his place, and as soon as he looked up, he saw Master Tang in front of her. He just walked to his place and was about to sit down. As soon as he lowered his head, he met Man Bao's eyes, and they both fell silent. A bit. Man Bao was the first to return to his senses, and raised his hand to greet him happily. Master Tang nodded at her, and was about to sit down when he saw Man Bao looking in his direction with a surprised look on his face, and then he waved his little paw excitedly. He looked back and saw that Yang Heshu had greeted the adults outside and came in. Seeing Man Bao also smiling, he didn't sit down in a hurry, but went up to talk to her. "You're too early." Man Bao proudly said, "After all, this is the first time to attend the great court, so naturally I can't be late." Yang Heshu nodded and nodded approvingly with her. Yang Heshu and Tang He sat side by side, right in front of Man Bao. Soon another middle-aged uncle came over. Master Tang and Master Yang greeted each other and called out, "Guo County Magistrate." Man Bao knew that this was the magistrate of Wanyan County. He sat behind Tang He, right next to Man Bao. County Magistrate Guo returned the salute, then turned around again, saw Man Bao paused and saluted, "Lord Xiaozhou." Man Bao immediately stood up to return the salute, and also called out, "Master Guo." Nearby officials entered their seats one after another, and greeted Man Bao regardless of whether they knew them or not, "Lord Zhou Xiao." "Sir Xiaozhou." "Dr. Zhou." Man Bao, regardless of whether he knew him or not, bowed his hands in groups and saluted. Those who knew him would shout, and those who did not know him would bow down and bow in return. Finally, everyone saluted, and each sat down in their respective positions and waited. The first to come were these small officials. The adults were either talking outside the hall, or sitting and waiting in the side hall. When the time was almost up, they entered, and when the time was up, a servant called the name, indicating that the emperor had arrived, and everyone got up from their seats and stood aside. Said, "See your majesty, your majesty Wanan." The emperor waved his hand and said, "Excuse the ceremony and give you a seat." Guzhong, who was beside the emperor, shouted loudly and announced, "No ceremony, a seat." Then everyone straightened up and took their seats. Man Bao sat cross-legged on her low seat, and felt that the chair was not only a little cold, but also a little awkward. I wonder if she can bring a soft cushion next time. However, the cold wind that had been blowing faintly from the left window seemed to disappear. Tang He and the magistrate Guo were much taller than Man Bao, and sat in the last row again. Once they sat down, they blocked the only ventilation. Man Bao couldn't help but quietly glanced at Magistrate Guo and Zhou on the left. The Tang County magistrate in front was very satisfied with his position. Just thinking about it, the meeting has already begun. The first thing everyone discussed is the important facts presented by various places. For example, it is starting to snow in various places now, and all places must report the amount of snowfall to check whether there is any disaster. After listening for a while, Man Bao didn't hear any news from Lujiang County. These things were not her interest, so she was a little distracted. When she was distracted, her eyelids couldn't help getting heavier and heavier, her little head slowly and slowly lowered, and her breathing gradually became longer. Coco. This is the host's autonomous behavior, and it does not conflict with the recording behavior. According to the program, it should not interfere, but it still couldn't help reminding, "Host, it's hard to sleep at the conference, right?" Thinking of this voice in his mind, Man Bao agreed with it, and then he felt dazedly awake, trying to wake up and listening carefully. Keek received the host's "I know" in his mind, and then the host's radio waves fluctuated, and he fell asleep more deeply. Coco. It doesn't matter. Man Bao fell asleep with her head lowered, but she didn't sleep soundly. She could still hear the speeches in the hall. Several times when Keek thought she was about to be found, she raised her head slightly. He opened his eyes and looked ahead, moved his numb body, lowered his head and continued to doze off. Keek was stunned. He grew up with her, and it was the first time he knew that she had such a skill. It's a pity that it doesn't know how restless Man Bao is sleeping. She has been fighting in her heart. It was as if there were several villains in my heart, and one said, "It's not right to sleep." One said, "If you are caught, you will be fined." Another said, "It's a shame, in front of so many people." But the little man sitting in the middle couldn't wake up little by little, so she could only wake up every now and then and look around. Of course, she thought it was from time to time, and the interval was not long, but in Keek's view, it was simply sleeping all the time. Zhou Man thought he was obscure, but the magistrate Guo who was sitting next to her was not a fool. He turned his head to look at Zhou Man's head bit by bit, opened his mouth, but didn't say anything for a while. Forget it, the age is not much different from his daughter. It is said that her main duty is to be an imperial physician, so why should she come to court? Those adults are two tossing people. The county magistrate Guo turned his head to one side, and came to see him out of sight. No one disturbed him, and Man Bao slept deeper and deeper, and slept longer and longer. Suddenly, Man Bao was stabbed. She woke up instantly, opened her eyes and raised her head to look innocently in front of her. He saw Master Tang get up and tidied up his clothes, and while he was arranging his clothes, he turned his head slightly and glared at her secretly. Man Bao sat upright in an instant and did not dare to fall asleep again, but she was also in a lot of energy now, although she felt that she had only slept for less than a quarter of an hour. She couldn't help but ask Keek, "How long have I slept?" Keek, 1 hour and 12 minutes. Manbao couldn't believe how she could have slept for so long when she only felt like she was gone for a while. Just as he was thinking, Master Tang had already walked to the front, bowed slightly and replied, "Ms. Su has already confessed, saying that she was instructed by Yu Shui, the housekeeper of the Yang family on Shui Le Street, and the minister took Yu Shui for questioning yesterday. But Your Majesty, I would like to ask Yang Rong personally. Yang Rong is the uncle of the fifth prince and the elder brother of concubine Yang Gui. He only has a virtual position and no real position, so he is not facing the upper hand at this time." The emperor said with a blank face, "You are allowed to ask. You are the magistrate of Chang'an County, and he is from Chang'an County. Can't you ask him?" "Your Majesty, the servants in Yang's mansion said that Yang Rong was not at home, but he couldn't say where he went. The minister stayed from noon to night yesterday and didn't see anyone." "Emperor, Yin Li." Yin Li bowed his body and said, "The minister has also gone, but after the Yang family became the duke, the minister could not force his way in without an edict. The main reason is that they didn't have a confession from Yu Shui. He either said that he was wronged, or that he was instigated by himself, and at one point he wanted to commit suicide. They don't have any evidence to forcibly enter now. Concubine Yang Gui and the fifth prince are still in the palace, so the two of them are tied up." See you at 4 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1759. The emperor was very happy, and smiled. "In that case, Guzhong, you go and invite people to come. The emperor has an invitation, but whether you are at home or not, you have to be called into the palace, and your Yang family is not a hermit." Guzhong responded, bowed, and retreated. At this point, the case is already half clear, but the emperor's mood is not very good, and the person sitting up is not very good. In the past 2 days, they have vaguely figured out that this time there are a lot of people in the palace, and many of them are trained by some people sitting below. Even after the discussion was over, the emperor waved his hand, and the somewhat angry escort retreated. Manbao stood up with a confused face, got out of the queue, and knelt down to send the emperor away. When the adults in front of her and next to her also got up, she got up, then reached out to support her tube cap, rubbed her eyes, and rubbed the feces from the eye sockets, and then lowered her head and carefully approached Yang Heshu. Yang Heshu whispered to her, "Even if you're going to sleep, you should be alert, and it's fine if you can't discuss things related to you. When the meeting is over, whether or not you will be called, you have to stay awake and be prepared. Talk back." Manbao nodded repeatedly, indicating that he understood, and then asked in a low voice, "Brother Yang, who is Yang Rong? Is he the one who instructed Suyu to change the needle bag?" Yang Heshu said with deep eyes, "We have to wait for Zhaihe to find out. Yang Rong is the uncle of the fifth prince, and their family lives in Shul Street." Manbao vaguely felt that something was wrong, and only remembered when he walked out of the palace door, "But isn't the fifth prince your cousin?" Yang Heshu laughed, reached out and patted her head, "Yes." Having said that, he turned and left. Manbao rubbed his head, looked back for Tang He, found that he was talking to Yin Li, and went after Yang Heshu. After leaving the hall, everyone went back to their respective offices. Some stayed in the palace, some went out to the office in the imperial city, and some went to the East Palace. Manbao and Yang Heshu were on the same road, and some adults who had not had time to go far saw Zhou Man holding the official hat with one hand and running to Yang Heshu with the other, talking to him with a small head raised. All the adults. Someone asked, "Yang Changbo is very popular with girls in the capital." "Yeah, the adults are misunderstood at first glance. If you take a closer look, it's not like those girls look at Lord Xiao Yang. And I heard that Zhou Man is already engaged, right? It's her junior brother. Man Bao lowered his voice and asked, will Yang Rong be called to Chaoshang for questioning, and will I also confront him in Shangqiao? Yang Hesha smiled and said, no, although I don't know what will happen in the end, but today His Majesty has enough to put on Yang Rong's face, and when he comes up to ask questions, not to mention the Yang clan, even the 5 princes and their sons can't be alone, at most Xiao Chao will ask questions, that's not what we can go to. He paused and reassured, don't be afraid. Even if you confront, you are still a victim. You are just an imperial physician, and you don't know anything. All you know is that they don't dare to do anything to you. Man Bao heaved a sigh of relief, and thought of it with hindsight, Brother Yang, the Yang family is your home. Seeing her, Yang Heshu only remembered it now, couldn't help but narrowed his eyes with a smile, and said happily, yes, my family is the direct branch of the Yang family. Man Bao looked at him worriedly and asked in a low voice, will that involve you? Yang Heshu shook his head slightly and smiled and said, don't worry, the Yang family is very big, and everything will not involve my family. By the way, Brother Qi has grown up, and your sister-in-law also said that she wants to invite you as a guest, but I seem to have heard that you left the city as soon as you left the palace. Man Bao nodded, I went to Zhuangzi to play. Then how about you going to my house next time? I'll send someone back to hunt a deer, and we can roast deer in the garden to eat. When Man Bao heard this, he nodded again and again, okay, okay. Yang Hesha nodded with a smile, then the matter is settled. When the two of them talked about food, Man Bao was so excited that he quickly forgot about it. However, after hesitating, Yang Hesha, who returned to the Chongguan pavilion, still submitted a letter to the Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Household to resign, and asked to leave the East Palace to avoid suspicion. Lu Shangshu was withdrawing from the Emperor's study at that time, and the group happened to meet Yang Rong, who hurriedly entered the palace for an audience, at the door. The other party's face was pale, and there was a bit of sweat on his forehead. At first glance, the situation was not very good. The elders looked at each other, and then went out quietly, just pretending that they couldn't see it. Yang Rong went in, Yin Li and Tang He were still there, they were waiting to ask him something. Lu Shangshu walked halfway and sighed, feeling that this year is really not peaceful, since the beginning of spring until now, things have not been interrupted, especially in the East Palace. I didn't think it before, but now that I think about it, the East Palace is indeed miserable, and it seems to have been framed all the time. He couldn't help but glanced at Wei Ji and Lord Tang, and couldn't help but whisper, I heard that this time the palace has taken many people, not only those who participated in changing needle bags, but also many eyeliners have been pulled out. When old Master Tang didn't speak, Wei Ji couldn't help but glanced at him and said, Lu Shangshu, it's been a while, how dare you hear about it? Lu Shangshu was stunned for a moment, then immediately shivered and explained, don't get me wrong, Mr. Wei, I was listening to other adults talking, but I didn't go to the palace to ask for news. Old Master Tang still didn't speak. Wei Ji continued, this can't be said to us, so I have to tell Yin Li. Lu Shangshu. When he returned to the Ministry of Housing, when he saw Yang Hesha's resignation letter, he couldn't help but sigh deeply, and couldn't help but say to his confidant, this is the most unfortunate place, this matter doesn't involve Yang Hesha's return, if implicated in him, that is not worth the loss. The right servant of the Ministry of Housing knew that the next step for Yang Hesha should be to sit in his seat, and the other party could be outstanding. Not only the emperor, but also their ministers were very satisfied. As the confidant of their minister, he knew that Yang Hesha was likely to be the next minister, and he was ahead of him. Although he was a little jealous in the past, he couldn't help but feel a little pity now. Master Yang is indeed outstanding. Lu Shangshu couldn't help but muttered in a low voice, Yang Haoyi doesn't know what to think. If I want to have such a son, I won't let others block his way. The right waiter couldn't help but talk to their ministers, if this is Yang Rong's own doing, and he doesn't do Yang Haoyi's affairs, it shouldn't be involved in their family, right? Lu Shangshu glanced at him and said, you too underestimate Yang Haoyi, he is the leader of the clan after all, even if he doesn't participate in such a big thing, he won't know anything, just see if he can. The strong man can't break his wrist. The right waiter whispered, it is not against the law to shelter relatives. It's not breaking the law, but it's taboo, Lu Shangshu said, especially, if your majesty doesn't say anything about it, can you not hate them in your heart? The right servant looked at Yang Heshu's resignation letter and asked, then this? Lu Shangshu thought about it, and then he received it and said, let me and his majesty report it. See you at 9. Ask for a monthly pass. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1760. Yang Heshu didn't say it, but Man Bao still knew that he was in a bad situation. Kongwengan was not a peach blossom garden, so the disputes between the palace and the court were naturally discussed. Now Xiaoyu and Zheng, they all went back to Taiyuan Hospital to repair books, only Man Bao remained in Chongguan Hall. After all, she eats and lives here, and there is so much information here, of course she prefers it here. So in the afternoon, she came back from class at the Imperial Physician's office, and before she entered the door, she heard several editors in the library quietly discussing Yang Heshu. One said, I heard that Mr. Yang has written a letter to resign. I don't know if he has left the Imperial Physician's office and the Ministry of Households. Where is he going to be transferred? No matter where he goes, he has a great future. Originally, His Majesty valued him, but after 3 or 5 years, the Imperial Physician's office trained the first batch of doctors, and when the medical offices in various places were opened, he would be the first. If you transfer back to the Ministry of Household, you won't be able to escape from the position of a servant. That is, with his talent, he can take over the household from Lu Shangshu in 7 or 8 years at most. At this rate, he might become the youngest prime minister since the founding of the Jin dynasty. It can't be so fast. The 2 servants of the Ministry of Household are not bad now. They don't have enough family background, and they must be released outside if they want to train their qualifications. I heard that the Zhoushilang of the Ministry of Household has already planned to release it. Yeah, in this dynasty, those whose family background is higher than Yang Heshu can't compare to him, those whose talents are comparable to him are not comparable to their family background. The editor shook his head and said, it's a pity, it's a pity. This case was investigated by Tang He. In the past, they were inseparable, but this time they didn't say hello. Hey, a word of profit. After all, the Yang family has a prince. If the 5th prince is lucky, then the Yang family will be a relative. What's so good about a foreign relative? Is a grandson a foreigner? Can he be compared to his own son? One editor said, a single emperor can only protect the prosperity of the family for 2 generations, but a prime minister can protect the family for 3 generations. Said, Yang Haoyi bought the casket and returned the pearl, not to mention that this is not his own grandson. Now that the prince has given birth to the eldest son, and his position is consolidated, they are afraid that they will all miscalculate. Man Bao turned around and left. She went to the front to find Yang Heshu, and was told that the always diligent Yang Heshu had left the palace and went home. This is a rare thing. There are a lot of things in the Imperial Physician's office. He often needs to stay until the sun sets before leaving the palace, and rarely gets off on time. Man Bao stood in front of him for a while, then turned to look for Bai Shan in the classroom, and happened to meet Kong Jiju telling them about Guanzhong and Duke Huan of Qi, so she leaned against the wall and listened. It was about to finish school, and Man Bao only listened to the tale. But she had heard the story of Guanzhong and Duke Huan of Qi before. Although the emphasis of the gentleman in each period was different, some things would not change. For example, Guanzhong is the #1 prime minister in the world. Kong Jiju took the book and came out. Seeing Zhou Man standing leaning against the wall with his head lowered, he couldn't help but stop. Are you here for class? Man Bao shook his head, thought about it, nodded again, and asked, Kong Jiju, if Duke Huan of Qi didn't listen to Bao Shiya's advice back then, and he didn't need Guanzhong or kill him, would Qi state still be able to join forces? Kong Jiju thought about it and then said, it's very difficult. Guanzongji's ability is rare in the world. Confucius once said, Wei Guanzhong, I have been sent to Zhou. The prince originally wanted to wait for Kong Jiju to go far before getting up and leaving, but seeing the two of them standing outside the window talking and never leaving, he got up and walked to the door with his hands behind his back to see them. He heard Zhou Man ask, Kong Jiju, if you knew that someone had the ability to Guanzhong, would you recommend him to His Majesty? Kong Jiju said proudly, of course, this is the luck of the country. Man Bao nodded, stepped back and thanked Kong Jiju for answering the question. Kong Jiju couldn't help looking at her seriously, and seeing that she had no intention of continuing, he turned and left. Before leaving, he glanced at the prince lightly. As soon as he left, the suppressed classmates in the classroom immediately got up, but because the prince was standing at the door, everyone got up and eager to try, but still did not dare to be presumptuous. Bai Shan was in a hurry. After salute with the prince, he carefully got out of his side, ran to Man Bao and asked, I forgot to ask you, did anything happen to the court today? They didn't see each other at lunch, because Man Bao went to the imperial physician's office. Man Bao said, nothing happened, I just sat and listened to them. Then he accidentally fell asleep early in the morning. The prince stepped forward with his hands behind his back and asked her, who is that person who has the power of Guanzhong? Man Bao said without hesitation, it's Lord Yang and Shu Yang. The prince turned and left. Yang Heshu's talent is good, but it's too much to say that he has Guanzongji's talent. Seeing him without hesitation, Man Bao pursed his mouth, turned his head and asked Bai Shan, don't you think Brother Yang is very powerful? Bai Shan nodded, it's very powerful. Recalling his hands-on and generosity in Lujian County, Bai Shan asked, what's wrong with Brother Yang? Man Bao sighed and looked left and right. He didn't want to mention it in front of so many people, so everyone went to the observation building and asked Ma Fuming to pick up the food boxes while sitting upstairs and talking about what she knew. Brother Yang seems to be having a hard time now. Lu Huan, who followed to join in the fun, was stunned and asked in confusion, listen to what you mean, it was the Yang family who wanted to harm Man Bao and the crown princess, and Su Yu's evidence was brought out by Man Bao, so we still need it now. Do you sympathize with Lord Yang? Everyone looked at him with contempt. Bai Erlang said, you're too superficial, and this matter has nothing to do with Senior Brother Yang. Senior Brother Yang has always been bright, and this matter seems to be implicated. Bai Shan also nodded, Man Bao is also innocent, not even Su Yu is much wrong. The real culprits are those who raised her and threatened her. Why can't we sympathize with Brother Yang? Yin he said, but we really can't do anything about this matter. I think there are not a few people in the DPRK who were jealous of Yang Shuexian. This time, whether he participates or not, he will be implicated. Bai Shan felt uncomfortable, frowning and said, so it's actually better for Brother Yang to resign from the East Palace at this time. Man Bao said uncomfortably, but if this is the case, wouldn't the road to Qingyun for Yang Shuexian be cut off? Bai Shan smiled and said, where is it so easy to break? You underestimate Brother Yang too much. He said, if you don't believe me, go and ask Brother Yang in person /. Man Bao wanted to ask, but he didn't have the chance to see him for the next 7 days, not only him, but also Tang He and she. First, she was busy, and second, Tang He was also busy. The emperor was very angry. Yang Rong was sent to the prison of Dali Temple, and there were quite a few ministers who were recruited for questioning with him. Most of them were offshoots of aristocratic families. I heard that the Kui clan, the Wan clan of Lanja and the patriarch of the Lu clan have all come to the capital to plead guilty. Of course, they are not here to confess their guilt. They think it is not good for them to be imprisoned and let the clansmen make such a big mistake. This is their fault. Wrong. See you at 11 o'clock. I have revised the chapter drowsy, because I forgot that Man Bao's official was older than Tang's, so the position was reversed.